Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. Bai Xiaochun's reply immediately caused Zhao Wuchang's heart to tremble. How could this master of his speak with such shocking forwardness? All of the other disciples gasped, and then pretended that they hadn't even heard the Middle Peak Grand Elder be addressed in such a saucy fashion. Song Junwan's eyes went wide. Her first impression was that Night Crypt was intentionally being disrespectful, but then she saw the gleam of infatuation in his eyes, and smiled flirtatiously. For some reason, he suddenly seemed even more charming than before. Big sis? Strange expressions could be seen on the faces of the Grand Elders from the three other peaks. They looked at Bai Xiaochun, and then at Song Junwan. Finally, they shook their heads and turned to leave. As for Zhao Wuchang, he chose to go to Lesser Marsh Peak. Before making his way off, the Grand Elder from Corpse Peak sighed lamentingly. He truly felt regret that Bai Xiaochun had picked Middle Peak, and also wasn't quite willing to lose such an exquisite disciple who was clearly connected to Corpse Peak by destiny. Stepping forward, he produced a jade slip, which he handed to Bai Xiaochun. Night Crypt, this is my command medallion. If you ever change your mind, bring it to Corpse Peak. We'll always have a Dharma protector spot open for you. Bai Xiaochun took the command medallion graciously, thinking about how wonderfully the Bloodstream sect was treating him. Although they did things a bit brutally, they truly took good care of him. When I cause disasters, they don't punish me, they reward me, he thought. The four Grand Elders even fought over me, and in the end, the Corpse Peak Grand Elder still has his sights set on me. He sighed again. As everyone left, Song Junwan of Middle Peak looked Bai Xiaochun up and down, smiling the entire time. She had a smoking hot body, and as soon as she took a step forward, her milky white thigh was revealed. It was incredibly enticing, and despite the fact that Bai Xiaochun felt himself to be a person with iron resolve, he couldn't keep from staring. His heart also began to thump in his chest. Steamily, Song Junwan swayed up to Bai Xiaochun and reached her fair finger out to stroke his chin. Her crimson lips turned up in a slight smile, and she sighed. What did you just call me, you little rascal? Big sis Song, he replied shyly, his face flushing a bit as her delicate fragrance wafted into his nose. When she saw him acting in such a way, Song Junwan laughed softly. Lifting her eyebrows slightly, she reached out and put a jade pendant in his hand. Then, she turned sensuously and floated away. Bai Xiaochun stood there alone on the precipice of never-ending blood, holding the jade pendant in his hand, sighing at the lengths to which he had to go to get the relic of eternal indestructibility. He couldn't help but admire himself. Then he thought about the matter of calling Song Junwan Big Sis. Next time he met Song K, he would obviously have the greater seniority. Even more excited than before, he proudly returned to his Immortals cave. By then it was evening. After arriving, he began to pack his bags in preparation for reporting into Middle Peak the following morning. Late in the night, as Bai Xiaochun was sitting there meditating, moonlight suddenly spilled in through the window, casting a shadow right in front of him. As it did, an unspeakable feeling of dread filled him. It was almost as if an invisible figure were about to take shape in front of him. His eyes went wide, and his scalp went numb. Even as he watched, his shadow rippled and distorted, almost as if it were made from mist. In the blink of an eye, it filled the Immortals cave, which went pitch black. It was as if even the moonlight were infected, and had been cut away. As soon as he saw what was happening, Bai Xiaochun thought of the mysterious sect that imposter Night Crypt had mentioned. Bai Xiaochun had never forgotten the stories of that sect, and at the moment, although his expression remained the same, inwardly he was getting very nervous. He quickly rose to his feet and began to look around the area carefully. Imposter Night Crypt said that over the decades, the mysterious sect only appeared 3 times. It's been quite some time since their last appearance. Why didn't they ever show up again? His heart began to thump in fear. If that mysterious sect saw through his mask, who knew what could happen? He soon found that within the shadow-wreathed Immortals cave, the ground was rippling, almost as if it were water. Soon, it turned translucent, and Bai Xiaochun was suddenly out in an illusory world. At first, it seemed like the world existed underground, but upon closer inspection, Bai Xiaochun was shocked to realize that it was actually a projection. It was almost as if he were on the other side of a mirror, looking into another location. That world had mountains and bodies of water, as well as a blue sky dotted with white clouds. Gradually, a white-robed figure appeared, radiating a profoundly ancient aura. For some reason, Bai Xiaochun immediately knew that this was a powerful expert from that mysterious sect. In that instant, he gained a much deeper understanding of how powerful that mysterious sect was. Night crypt. When the white-robed figure spoke into his mind, it was impossible to determine if the voice belonged to a man or a woman. Bai Xiaochun was already getting nervous, but apparently, the white-robed figure didn't notice that anything was amiss. The figure waved a sleeve, and 3 medicinal pill bottles appeared, all of them decorated with the mark of a shining moon. They immediately flew toward the translucent ground, as if they were going to pierce through and appear inside the immortals' cave. The ripples in the floor grew more intense as the pill bottles grew close. I sensed the fluctuations of foundation establishment coming from you, the figure said. You succeeded. Excellent. These are the medicinal pills you need. They should get you all the way to mid-foundation establishment. The cost of sending these pills to you far exceeds the value of the pills themselves. Remember, the relic of eternal indestructibility is located beneath the immortals' cave of the Grand Elder of Middle Peak. It doesn't matter how long it takes, you have to figure out a way to get it. The pill bottles finally pierced their way through the ground and into the immortals' cave. At the same time, the white-robed figure faded away. The floor returned to normal, and the shadows vanished. Once again, moonlight spilled down through the window. Only a few moments had passed, and Bai Xiaochun hadn't spoken a single word. However, he was already covered with sweat. Taking a deep breath, he calmed himself down. The strange behavior of this mysterious sect far exceeded anything he could have imagined. Just what kind of sect are they? He thought. From what he could tell, they were so much more powerful than the bloodstream sect that the two were beyond compare. Obviously, despite their power, they were located very, very far away. Over there, it's actually daytime, he thought. He reached up and touched the mask he was wearing. The fact that his secret identity remained a secret left him feeling a lot better than before. So not even the white-robed emissary noticed that I took the imposter's place? Or did the emissary notice and just not say anything? After a moment of hesitation, he decided to try to get confirmation from Imposter Nightcrypt. Imposter Nightcrypt felt truly bitter at what had just happened. He had requested these medicinal pills several times, and only now had they finally been delivered. Except, now they belonged to Bai Xiaochun. After a long moment, he sighed. Not daring to complain, he began to answer Bai Xiaochun's questions. In the end, Bai Xiaochun was left frowning. There really was no way to determine if the white-robed figure had seen through his disguise or not. Whatever, there's no use in thinking about it too much. Even if he did notice, he didn't say anything. In that case, we have a mutual understanding. Based on my previous analysis, it seems more likely than ever that they're just putting on a show. Or who knows, maybe he really didn't notice. Bai Xiaochun shook his head and looked down at the 3 pill bottles with the shining moon marks. One by one, he opened them all. Within the medicinal pill bottles were a total of 30 medicinal pills. Upon closer examination, Bai Xiaochun's eyes went wide. They're all superior grade. Tier 4 spirit medicine. What sect is this? They're terrifying. I don't even recognize what type of spirit medicine it is. And the medicinal plant ingredients. After analyzing what he could smell, he was sure that there were dozens of ingredients in the medicine, and yet, he could only identify about half of them. However, he could assess their efficacy, and was certain that it was just as the white-robed figure had said. These 3 pill bottles were enough to get a mortal Dao Foundation establishment cultivator from the early level to the mid-level. Of course, they wouldn't be of much use at all to Bai Xiaochun. After all, he was already in the Heaven Dao Foundation establishment stage. Although medicinal pills could help him to some degree, what he needed more was refined Heavenspan river water. However, these pills would definitely help him significantly in his concocting. Bai Xiaochun spent the whole night in thought. The following morning at dawn, he yawned and put his thoughts regarding the mysterious sect to rest for the moment. Emerging from his immortal's cave, he looked back at the floor for a moment, then flew at top speed toward Middle Peak. Upon arriving, he looked at the upper half of Middle Peak, stretching at an angle up into the sky. Thinking about how it was really the finger of a giant, he sighed inwardly. Almost as soon as he arrived at Middle Peak, he ran into a shimmering field of light. Once it sensed the jade pendant he held, it dispersed, allowing him to enter Middle Peak. Without that jade pendant, he would receive severe punishment for trying to charge onto the mountain. The ranking system of the bloodstream sect was strictly enforced, and only Foundation establishment cultivators were allowed onto the 4 peaks. As he proceeded along, he could sense how majestic the mountain was. All of the plants and vegetation were crimson, and there were even blood-colored rivers and streams visible. His undying live forever technique stirred, and when he looked over at one of the blood-colored waterfalls off in the distance, the sensation of being summoned by the hand grew even stronger. That summons was stirring his undying live forever technique, calling out to him, making him feel almost as if he were becoming the giant. Holy Land. Without even realizing what he was doing, Bai Xiaochun walked over to the edge of the blood waterfall he'd just spotted, and could immediately sense the powerful blood qi. To him, blood qi was very important to replenish his vital energy. Taking in a deep breath, he felt his spirits lifting, and just when he was about to begin to absorb the blood qi, a sensation of crisis filled him. He immediately backed up, whereupon a boom echoed out from the spot where he had been standing. A beam of blood-colored light, almost like sword qi, had slashed into that very spot. The surrounding plants and vegetation whipped back and forth from the blast, and a huge furrow was hewn out in the ground. "Ee," someone said. Then, a young man strode out from within the blood waterfall. He wore all red, and had an icily cold arrogance to him as he stared at Bai Xiaochun. "Screw off. You're not allowed in this area." Bai Xiaochun immediately recognized the young man. It was Song Ke. Immediately after issuing his command, he turned and walked back into the blood waterfall, where he sat back down cross-legged. "So, this moron is here," Bai Xiaochun thought. "Humph, what makes you think you're so special? Back in the fallen sword world, you were crying for your mommy and daddy when I beat you up. Just wait until I get famous in the bloodstream sect, I'll show you a thing or two." Humph. Glaring hatefully, Bai Xiaochun decided that he would definitely find an opportunity to call Song Junwan, Big Sis, in front of Song Ke. That would definitely heap humiliation onto his head. 1. In this passage, the word Bai Xiaochun uses to insult Song Ke is a common word for lacks intelligence, that also contains the same character, Ke, from his name, making for some clever wordplay. Eyes flickering coldly, he left. He walked along to visit some of the places he noticed that had especially strong blood qi, but every time he got close, someone would attack him and drive him away. None of them were very polite at all, 3 of them even attacked him with completely murderous auras. If he hadn't fled fast enough, it seemed likely that he would have been killed. Bai Xiaochun grumbled to himself louder and louder at how overbearing these people were. All he wanted to do was breathe in some blood qi, not stake a claim to their territory. Eventually, he arrived at Middle Peak Pavilion, where newly promoted Dharma protectors were supposed to check in. Waiting there for him was an old man in the late Foundation establishment stage. After sizing Bai Xiaochun up, and realizing that he was at Mortal Dao Foundation establishment, a condescending expression appeared on his face, and he took the jade pendant from Bai Xiaochun. Then he handed him a new identity medallion, along with a crimson jade slip. That jade slip contains Middle Peak's secret magic, the Blood Annihilation World. If you don't understand the cultivation method, you can attend one of the monthly training sessions administered by a Prime Elder. It costs merit points to ask questions about the Tao, but if you lack merit points, you could always request a personal audience with a Prime Elder. As for your Immortals Cave, we have 37 vacancies for Dharma protectors at the moment. Pick anyone that you want. If you don't like what you see, and you think you're strong enough, you can simply take an Immortals Cave from someone else. Alright, that's it, you can go now. Waving his hand, he closed his eyes to meditate. It all seemed overly simple to Bai Xiaochun, who took the 2 pieces of jade. After sending some divine sense into the medallion, he saw a map of Middle Peak, as well as notations on all the Immortals' caves. Considering it was morning, he decided to simply walk around and take in the sights. By the time evening fell, he'd had a chance to examine all of the Immortals' caves in the Dharma Protector District. Taken on their own, they were actually pretty nice, but compared to the other occupied caves, they were quite deficient in terms of blood qi. However, he had no choice at the moment other than to select the best one he could find, and move in. Looking around at his new Immortals Cave, he had to admit that it was much better than the cave in the inner sect. However, he still didn't think it measured up to the Spirit Stream sect. Having no other options, he sighed and produced the blood-colored jade slip, which he scanned with spiritual power. Use blood qi to form a sword, transform it into a world of annihilation? Whether you're injured or you injure someone else, the blood qi that spills out will make the blood sword stronger. Now this is a secret magic. Feeling a bit shocked, he studied the information in more detail, causing his face to flicker with various reactions. In the end, he was even more shocked than he had been at first, and thought back to when Song Ke had attacked him with a blood sword in the Fallen Sword world. This blood sword is a secret legacy of Middle Peak. On Corpse Peak, they refine corpses, on Nameless Peak they raise gargoyles, on Lesser Marsh Peak they have devil blood body refinement, and on Middle Peak, they have this blood sword annihilation world. Bai Xiaochun was shaken, and had to admit that in this regard, the Bloodstream sect was a bit better than the Spirit Stream sect. Here, the secret legacy techniques were given out to all qualified disciples to cultivate. Clearly, the blood annihilation world was completely beyond ordinary. After further study, Bai Xiaochun came across a description of the origin of the blood sword. Long ago, one of the bloodstream sect patriarchs was studying the enormous hand when he suddenly received some inspiration. He created the blood sword annihilation world, which was then amended and perfected by further generations. In the end, it became the secret magic of Middle Peak. After some more thought and study, he waved his right hand, causing all of his blood to suddenly stop flowing. Blood chi rose up from the ground around him, then began to form together into a shape in front of his finger. However, there was clearly not enough blood chi, and even after letting some time pass, there was no clear result. Frowning, Bai Xiaochun dispersed the blood chi. After some more thought, he studied the jade slip a bit more, and performed another test. However, the result was the same. There seemed to be some obstructions of some sort which were preventing a steady flow of blood chi. According to this jade slip, the first step in the blood sword is to extract all of the blood chi from your body, then transform it into sword chi, right in front of your finger. Then, you use the secret magic to change that foundation of sword chi into a blood sword. He tried one more time, yet failed again. Why isn't it working? After thinking the matter through even more, he abandoned the method described in the jade slip and instead called upon the undying live forever technique. Instantly, the swirling blood chi in the area began to stream toward him and merge into his body. In the space of a single breath, he then sent that blood chi toward the tip of his finger. There, it transformed into sword chi, 1/3 of a meter long. It all happened very naturally and without any hindrance whatsoever. If any observer had been able to watch what was happening, they would have been struck mute. In the entire history of the bloodstream sect, there had never been a single chosen who could form blood chi into sword chi in less than a day. Bai Xiaochun, despite having used an unorthodox method, had accomplished it in only a few breaths of time. Bai Xiaochun examined the sword chi at the tip of his finger, and knew that he had succeeded by doing something outside of the box. The blood annihilation world is incredible, and is obviously a magic designed to control undying blood. However, nobody in the bloodstream sect has true undying blood, so they have to rely on blood chi, which they use to transform their own blood. Obviously, the result is an impure product. That's why it requires extra blood chi, either by injuring someone else, or harming your own body. That's the only way to increase the power. Perhaps after a very long period in which your blood is mixed with the blood chi, you might be able to eventually reach the final level of the undying codex, which is undying blood. However, that would be a very, very difficult method. The best thing to do would be to use one's own undying blood to produce blood chi, then use that to form the sword chi. With that foundation, the strike of the blood sword would be strong enough to shake heaven and earth. Actually, my outside-the-box method wasn't really correct either. Taking a deep breath, he dispersed the sword chi, transforming it back into blood chi, which he absorbed into his body, then fused into his own flesh and blood. A tingling sensation washed through him. Then, instead of going on to practice the undying heavenly king, he performed an incantation gesture with his right hand and used the blood annihilation world mnemonic to try to extract the blood chi. In that instant, his flesh and blood shrank down slightly, and at the same time, blood chi emerged. That blood chi came from his undying gold skin and his undying heavenly king, which he had carefully developed over time. Now, it was being used to produce blood chi that counted as Bai Xiaochun's personal undying blood. Based on his current cultivation base, it was impossible for Bai Xiaochun to actually create his own undying blood. However, by means of this secret magic, he was actually able to forcibly produce some blood chi. It was scant, and yet, the summons from the enormous hand seemed to grow more intense as a result. Bai Xiaochun began to pant as he sent the stream of blood chi to the tip of his finger, where it transformed into sword chi. This was the true blood annihilation world, or perhaps, the true undying blood sword. Although it was only a sliver of the real thing, and perhaps couldn't even compare to other Foundation establishment cultivators, this strand of undying blood chi was crafted from countless ordinary bits of blood chi that had been refined into a state that could crush anything else as easily as dried weeds. In the instant that sword chi appeared, all of the blood chi on Middle Peak began to seethe. Countless Foundation establishment cultivators were shocked, and yet, had no idea what was causing the phenomenon. Bai Xiaochun was panting with excitement, never having believed that he would actually succeed. This isn't just a trump card, this is something I can use to form undying blood. With this, I should be able to make early contact with the undying blood level. Filled with excitement, he retracted his undying blood chi. As he continued to practice, the days passed by. The days went by, and Bai Xiaochun settled in as a Dharma protector of Middle Peak. He now learned more of certain matters that had been unclear to him before. For example, the war between the Profound Stream sect and the Pill Stream sect had expanded from small-scale fighting into large-scale warfare. As for the Bloodstream sect, they were already making their own preparations for war, and a murderous aura was slowly building up in the entire sect. What's with all this fighting and killing? Bai thought, why don't we all just get along and be happy? Wouldn't it be better to just join forces and go to the middle reaches together? Sighing, he continued with his cultivation and the absorption of blood qi. When he absorbed blood qi, it wouldn't merely rise up from the ground, but would rush toward him from the entire area outside his immortal's cave. Unfortunately, he didn't have a top-quality immortal's cave, but on the upside, he was in a relatively remote location where nobody else lived. Considering the overbearing way he was taking all the blood qi, nobody else would have been able to properly cultivate nearby. There were plenty of things to keep him busy. In addition to practicing the blood sword, he worked on his violet qi heavenspan incantation, and observed as the heavenspan river water was gradually absorbed by his first spiritual sea. And then there was his research into the human-controlling grand magic and protomagnetic power. Finally, he was gaining even greater control over his heavenspan Dharma eye. He felt himself getting stronger and stronger every day, and couldn't help but get excited. I'm on the verge of reaching the first level of the Undying Heavenly King. Plus, this blood sword completely suits me. This place is my own holy land. I don't ever want to leave. His cultivation was going along luxuriously. As he absorbed the massive quantities of blood qi, his progress in the first level of the Undying Heavenly King continued rapidly. However, as he grew more and more powerful with the Undying Heavenly King, and built up more and more undying blood qi, the amount of blood qi he needed to absorb from his surroundings increased as well. Before long, the blood qi in the area wasn't sufficient for his cultivation. Eventually, it reached the point where after excitedly absorbing all blood qi he could, there wasn't enough left to work with. He was forced to wait until the following day for it to build up again. This won't work, he thought. He spent about half a day absorbing the blood qi that had built up, but there simply wasn't enough. Bai Xiaochun looked around anxiously, then thought about the other areas with stronger blood qi. But then he remembered how vicious the Bloodstream sect people were, and he started to get angry. All the best places are already occupied. Unfortunately, I can't just go over and beat them up. I have to keep a low profile. Bai Xiaochun sighed. Seeing how slow his cultivation was going now got him very nervous. Well, I don't really have any options. Since I can't cultivate in my own immortal's cave, I'll just have to go outside. Rubbing his forehead, he thought about it a bit more, then decided it was the right thing to do. After waiting until nightfall, he snuck out and picked an immortal's cave not too far away in the forest. After sitting down cross-legged some distance away from it, he closed his eyes and breathed in deeply. The area twisted and distorted, and then blood qi rose up from the ground. He quickly absorbed it into his body, which of course felt wonderful. He quickly unleashed the Undying Heavenly King, and when the undying blood qi felt strong enough, he took in another deep breath. Blood qi poured into him, and every part of his body felt like it was rejoicing. However, with Bai Xiaochun absorbing the blood qi, the levels in the area dropped noticeably. When it reached about 30% of its former level, the Foundation establishment cultivators in the area noticed, and were both shocked and alarmed. What's going on? Why did so much blood qi vanish? Did the area suddenly get haunted or something? The 7 or 8 Foundation establishment cultivators in the area all rushed out of their immortals' caves to investigate, bristling with murderous rage. When Bai Xiaochun realized what was happening, he quickly ceased any work with the technique and surreptitiously made his exit. The Foundation establishment cultivators searched the whole area but couldn't find anything amiss. Then they sensed the blood qi in the area slowly being restored, and they dispersed, suspicious as ever. Off in the distance, Bai Xiaochun stood there looking irritated. The people in the Bloodstream sect really were far too overbearing. He had barely been able to take 2 breaths before they had burst out of their immortals' caves to investigate. So, he said, sighing, it seems I can't stay in place for very long. At the most, I can take 2 breaths before leaving. But then, he suddenly remembered something, and looked around the area vigilantly. After making sure he didn't see any rabbit ears, he breathed a sigh of relief at the bitterness of the life he led. In the future, he would have to be sure to whisper very quietly, and also be very careful. In any case, he made his decision. As of this moment, he looked just like he had back in his spirit tail chicken thieving days in the Spirit Stream sect. But then, he realized something didn't seem right. After some more thinking, he started to get mad. No, I'm related to this giant. Therefore, this stuff belongs to me. They're stealing my blood qi. Shameless. How dare they steal my blood qi? Well, I'll just have to endure the humiliation. I refuse to butt heads with idiots. Fuming, he made his way off into the distance to another area. After sensing the levels of blood qi in the area, he rotated his cultivation base and turned himself into something like a black hole. Noiseless rumbling rose up that no one but Bai Xiaochun could hear. To him, it was like thunder in his brain. The black hole instantly caused all of the blood qi in the area to rush toward him. He quickly absorbed it, then hurried off. Behind him, cries of alarm rose up. And that was how he spent the entire night. The Foundation establishment cultivators on Middle Peak were all left frowning that night. Many of them had been practicing cultivation late into the night, but were then interrupted by a sudden lack of blood qi. Some of them were even hit by backlashes because of being interrupted at critical junctures. Enraged, they rushed out into the night to investigate, but by that time, Bai Xiaochun was long gone. Most tragic of all was one particular Foundation establishment cultivator of some fame, who other people had come to call Master God Diviner. He had a rather luxurious immortals cave which was surrounded by blood trees, and also occupied a relatively high position within the sect. That night, he was in the middle of performing a secret magic of augury, something that was dangerous to interrupt, and required a large intake of blood qi. When he was interrupted, and the intake of blood qi ceased, he coughed up a mouthful of blood and instantly withered visibly. His mind was then struck with such intense pain that he screamed and fainted. When the sun began to rise, Bai Xiaochun hurried back to this immortal's cave, filled with excitement. He had absorbed so much blood qi that not only was he able to resume cultivation, but he could do so even more quickly than before. Once he was back inside, he looked around proudly, and then stuck his chin up. Expression somber, he checked around to make sure the area was rabbit-free, then finally relaxed. Ha ha ha, my wits prevail again. I don't need to go robbing anybody, nor cause any fights. I just take 2 breaths wherever I go, and nobody's the wiser. Bai Xiaochun was very pleased. During the day, he worked with the Violet Qi Heavenspan incantation, the human-controlling grand magic, and proto-magnetic power, and when night fell, he snuck out into the shadows, as stealthily as a cat. This time, he picked a different route. Every place he stopped, he would breathe in deeply 2 times, then flee to another location, where he would do the same thing. His speed wasn't that of Heaven Dao Foundation establishment. Despite the powers of disguise provided by the mask, which masked the fluctuations of his cultivation base, he was doing everything else he could think of to avoid being identified as a fraud. That night, astonished cries of rage rose up all over Middle Peak. Damn it, where did all the blood qi go? What's going on? This is the 2nd night in a row. Something's wrong here. The most miserable of all was Master God Diviner. He had remained a slight coma for the entire day. When he finally woke up the following night, he looked around, ashen-faced and with bloodshot eyes, his rage burning. Who's plotting against me? A murderous aura erupted from within him, and his eyes burned with fury. Whoever you are, plotter, you're dead. Taking a deep breath, he suppressed the injuries from the previous night's backlash, then performed an incantation gesture. Instantly, his eyes shone with bright light. It's time to divine who exactly you are. Master God Diviner was the type of person who would seek revenge over the smallest grievance. He immediately performed auguries and divinations, causing vortexes to appear within his eyes. They spun faster and faster, sucking in a steady flow of blood qi from the area. At that point, a blurry figure appeared in his eyes. Just when Master God Diviner was about to try to force the figure into focus, the thieving Bai Xiaochun snuck into the area. It only took him a moment to breathe in deeply 2 times, whereupon howls of rage rose up. A tremor ran through Master God Diviner as the blood qi in the area suddenly vanished. The injury he had suppressed earlier flared out of control, and he coughed up another huge mouthful of blood before passing out. On the evening of the 3rd day, he finally forced his eyes opened. His body was weak, and blood was still oozing out of the corners of his mouth. He knew that he had been seriously injured, and couldn't perform any more auguries for at least a month. Brimming with rage, he screamed, I can't believe someone's really plotting against me. I'm gonna tear you to shreds. Gritting his teeth, Master God Diviner left his immortal's cave and traded with some fellow sect members to acquire medicinal pills to help his recovery. After hearing the grumblings regarding recent events, he realized that nobody was plotting against him specifically. However, his hatred still simmered. He told the other cultivators that he had divined that this was no natural disaster, but rather, was being perpetrated by a person, who was using some unknown method to absorb the local blood qi. Master God Diviner was relatively famous on Middle Peak, so people trusted his explanation. Therefore, the cultivators who had been most adversely affected during the events of the past 2 nights went out to look for the culprit. Another 2 nights passed, but nobody turned up any clues. And yet, the blood chi seemed to be constantly draining away. Killing intent rose up, and soon word began to spread. Did you hear about that mysterious cultivator on Middle Peak? Every night he sucks away all of the blood chi from the whole mountain peak. What a psycho. A lot of people have been injured in the middle of their cultivation. Lately, nobody even dares to practice any cultivation at all. Who is this guy? Does he have a suicide wish? If people figure out who he is, not even the sect could stop him from getting killed. Bai Xiaochun heard a lot of talk like that during the day, and it scared him so much he decided to rest for a few days. But when his cultivation speed slowed, he got anxious and once again ventured outside. However, many of the Foundation establishment cultivators had sworn oaths to catch the culprit. On one occasion, Bai Xiaochun even joined one of those groups, and joined in on the cursing, trying to look as angry as possible. Because of that, no one suspected him. 3 more days passed, during which Bai Xiaochun spent his nights trying to find places to absorb blood chi. However, too many Foundation establishment cultivators were out searching, and he never found a single opportunity. He spent some more time thinking, and decided that he shouldn't act rashly. A few more days passed, and eventually, the temporary unity of the Foundation establishment cultivators began to fade. At that point, Bai Xiaochun set out, humming a little tune as he went about absorbing blood chi. Sticking his chin up, he waved his sleeve and loftily said, "HMPH. You wanna compete with Bai Xiaochun? I've got more experience at this kind of thing than anyone." He reaped a great harvest that night. At one point, he passed an area that clearly had much stronger blood chi than the other areas. Delighted, he absorbed some of it, but didn't dare to stay long. And that was how things went for about half a month. When lots of people were out and about, he would stop. When the numbers thinned, he would go out to absorb some blood chi. His blood sword was becoming more and more solid, and the power of his undying heavenly king had already reached that of 7 mammoths. I'm going to hit 10 mammoths soon. The first level of my undying heavenly king will be finished, and I'll be able to unleash the mountain-shaking bash. Plus, I can feel that the blood sword is almost completely cultivated. Bai Xiaochun was starting to get very excited. As for the cultivators of Middle Peak, they were going mad. They were already vicious people to begin with, but with the half a month of torment provided by Bai Xiaochun, their killing intent grew even more pronounced. Their nights of cultivation during that time were never stable. That was especially true considering that Bai Xiaochun didn't have a set schedule or route. The Foundation establishment cultivators were getting to the point where they couldn't take it anymore. That was especially true of the cultivators who had been tormented by backlashes that left them coughing up blood. Who is it? I'm gonna kill this guy. Damn it, I'm gonna kill him. Is this guy looking to die? Even if my cultivation base is unstable, I'll still skin him alive. All of Middle Peak was in an uproar. Never before in their lives had these Foundation establishment cultivators experienced anything like this, and during the day, everyone walked around with bloodshot, murderous eyes. Bai Xiaochun was shocked by what he was seeing. In fact, before he stepped out of his immortals cave during the day, he would always rub his eyes hard until they turned red. Then, he would make sure to loudly curse the blood chi thieving fiend. Time passed, and none of the Foundation establishment cultivators gave up on searching for the culprit. Those who were adept at divination and augury did their best to use their powers to uncover who was responsible. But few people were truly skilled in such arts. Master God Diviner was actually the most famous and skilled, but his injuries made it impossible for him to use his arts. Therefore, all of the lower finger of Middle Peak could do nothing more than stew in fury. Bai Xiaochun immediately ceased any activities for a few days. When he came back out, he found that there were actually Foundation establishment cultivators patrolling all of the major areas. Apparently, everyone had truly united in rare fashion to deal with the common problem. Bai Xiaochun was completely shocked. After walking around for a bit, he finally sighed in resignation. Even as he was dejectedly trying to decide what to do next, he passed a certain area that seemed very quiet, and stopped to look around. Nobody's patrolling here? Blinking, he studied the area cautiously to confirm that no one was in the area. Only then did he remember that this was the location he had passed some time before that had stronger blood chi than usual. After poking around, he found a seemingly ordinary immortal's cave. He then pulled out a jade slip to check some information, after which his eyes shone brightly. How come I never paid attention to this place before? All the immortals' caves in this area are supposed to be empty. I wonder who this place belongs to? Oh well, it won't hurt to take a couple breaths. Licking his lips, he took a deep breath, causing the blood chi in the area to rush toward him. In fact, a huge blast came from the immortal's cave itself. In the end, he got as much blood chi as he would normally get from 2 or 3 of the other areas. This place is awesome. Not daring to stay in one place for too long, he quickly left. However, the next night he came back and took 2 more breaths. He did the same on the 3rd night and the 4th. To his delight, he found that nothing ever happened, and nobody even went by this particular immortal's cave. Eventually, on the 5th day, he worked up the gumption to take 10 breaths. At long last he was certain that there were no problems, and that nobody was in the immortal's cave. Furthermore, during the day, nobody seemed to care what was happening. And it was the same at night time. Ha ha ha, the heavens do have eyes. During the night of the 6th day, Bai Xiaochun showed up early and sat down to do his usual breathing. As of this moment, he was ready to complete the first level of the Undying Heavenly King. As soon as the technique stirred, the blood chi in the area began to rush toward him. Bai Xiaochun waved his hand in grand fashion, quickly absorbing the flow of blood chi. Inside the immortal's cave, everything began to rumble noiselessly. Massive amounts of blood chi surged out, pouring into Bai Xiaochun to fuel the cultivation of the Undying Live Forever technique. His entire body was sore and tingling, and the buildup of power was very obvious. Bai Xiaochun got more excited than ever, and suddenly, he was consumed with the desire to simply absorb as much blood chi as he could, without any regard for safety. It was a huge river flowing into him, making him feel almost like he was becoming an immortal. The truth was that there really wasn't anybody in the immortal's cave behind Bai Xiaochun. It wasn't a very large cave, and seemed temporarily unoccupied. The only thing inside of it was a small, blood-colored bottle. Sticking out of the top of the bottle was a blood-colored plum blossom. It would only take a glance at it to tell that it was a precious treasure. Beneath the bottle itself was a glowing red spell formation, with the bottle being located at the very center of it. Closer examination would reveal that there was a small aperture in the very center of the formation, which the bottle fit into perfectly. The blood bottle contained boundless blood chi, so much that it had formed a liquid, which now filled most of the little bottle. As Bai Xiaochun absorbed the blood chi, the liquid in the bottle was rapidly draining. In the time it takes an incense stick to burn, 30% of the liquid in the bottle drained away. Even as Bai Xiaochun excitedly absorbed the blood chi, something else happened in another location in the bloodstream sect. Somewhere on Ancestor Peak, there was a blood lake that was surrounded by plum blossoms. It looked like a celestial paradise. Next to the lake was an immortal's cave with a large, green door that emanated powerful pressure. Engraved on the surface of the door was a single, blood-colored plum blossom. Inside, the immortal's cave was lavishly decorated. Glowing pearls served as lamps, and everything was adorned with spirit stones. In the middle of the immortal's cave, a young woman sat cross-legged in meditation, wearing a blood-colored mask. This young woman was none other than Shui Mei. Suddenly, she opened her eyes and frowned. What happened? Why has there been such a shocking reduction in the blood chi in my blood bottle on Middle Peak? The immortal's cave where Bai Xiaochun was absorbing blood chi was Shui Mei's official residence on Middle Peak, although she rarely went there. She normally resided on Ancestor Peak. As for the Middle Peak Immortal's Cave, it was a strange place. Her father, Patriarch Limitless, had noticed the place's uniqueness years ago, and had set up a spell formation that made the blood chi there even stronger, far stronger than anywhere else on the lower finger of Middle Peak. Because of that, she had left a treasured blood bottle there which would slowly absorb the blood chi. 10 years had already passed, and it was almost full. When it was, she could begin to cultivate a certain secret magic of the sect. Because the blood bottle was connected to her mind, she could sense what was happening to it. Occasionally, it would naturally lose a bit of its blood chi, so she hadn't paid much attention to what had happened over the past few days. But the shocking reduction from just now was occurring much too quickly. In almost the blink of an eye, 40% of the liquid which had built up was gone. Shui Mei instantly started to get anxious. Her phoenix-like eyes flashing with anger, she rose to her feet and transformed into a beam of light that rumbled through the night, heading from Ancestor Peak toward Middle Peak. I need to see for myself what's causing this sudden reduction. Shui Mei became a beam of light that shot through the night at astonishing speed, whistling through the air toward Middle Peak. Almost instantly, Middle Peak filled with echoing rumbles. Shui Mei had always been a very domineering figure in the sect. That was simply how she acted, and others had always accepted that since her father was Patriarch Limitless. Shui Mei had come to realize that years ago, and thus, always did everything in intentionally overbearing fashion. As she arrived, the rumbling in the lower finger of middle peak caused all of the Foundation establishment Dharma protectors and elders to emerge from their immortals' caves. Shocked, they looked up to see Shui Mei flying through the air. She whistled along, just barely visible within the blood-colored light that surrounded her. Anyone who looked closely might be able to see her eyes beneath her blood-colored mask, flickering with cold arrogance. Everyone was instantly shaken. I can't believe young lady Shui Mei has returned to Middle Peak. Technically, she's an elder of Middle Peak, but she doesn't get along with Grand Elder Song Junwan, so she almost never appears here. Where is she headed? As people turned to look in the direction she was flying, they realized that there was a large accumulation of blood qi there. In fact, much of the blood qi on the mountain peak seemed to be slowly moving in that direction, causing a blood-colored light to illuminate the sky. All of the Foundation establishment cultivators' eyes flickered. That's where young lady Shui Mei's immortals cave is. The blood qi. Could it be that young lady Shui Mei has produced some valuable treasure? Everyone had their own speculations as they flew up into the air and headed toward the immortals cave. At the moment, Bai Xiaochun was in the middle of absorbing the blood qi from inside the immortals cave. As he did, his undying live forever technique rapidly built up power. His fleshly body grew stronger, and although he looked the same physically, he was getting more powerful by the moment. The first level of the Undying Heavenly King, 10 Mammoths Berserk Ghost Body. Bai Xiaochun excitedly focused on the sensation of his physical body getting explosively more powerful. 8 mammoths. 9 mammoths. Soon, he had reached the power level of 10 mammoths. Bai Xiaochun's mind filled with rumbling sounds, and cracking sounds rose up that only he could hear. At the same time, his flesh and blood exploded with tingling pain, almost as if freezing water were rushing through him. His body shook as the feeling spread out, filling him completely. He subconsciously took in another breath, and the tingling pain began to retract, slowly concentrating on one location in the pit of his stomach. There, it transformed into a boundless energy. That energy was formed from the intense trembling which racked his entire body. At the same time, his flesh and blood became a vortex which madly sucked in all of the blood qi in the immortals' cave. The blood qi raced toward him like stampeding horses. Even the blood qi outside of the immortals' cave began to rumble toward him. Bai Xiaochun was shaken, and even as he felt himself getting more and more powerful, a sensation of foreboding suddenly rose up in his heart. In the past, he had always controlled himself, and only absorbed a small amount of local blood qi. Moments ago, he had been attempting to absorb only the blood qi in the immortals' cave, which would have prevented any blood-colored light from rising into the air, thus making it very difficult for anyone to detect him. But now, the 10 mammoths berserk ghost body of the Undying Heavenly King had formed, and he had lost control. His body became a vortex, sucking in all of the blood qi, and causing blood-colored light to shine up visibly into the sky. He tried to stop it from happening, but was too late. As his body transformed, blood qi poured into him, and rumbling sounds echoed out in his mind. His body continued to tremble harder and harder, and his strength rose explosively. Soon, the power solidified. The strength of 10 mammoths formed the berserk ghost body. Rumble. Bai Xiaochun's eyes opened wide, and the image of a berserk ghost appeared behind him. Although it was blurry, that was only because it was still in the process of taking shape. Within a few months, it would be incredibly clear. A sense of limitless power filled every inch of him, and yet, there was no time for him to revel in any excitement. He knew that the blood-colored light shining up into the air would surely attract attention. The bloodstream sect people are too domineering. You even have to walk on eggshells when simply practicing cultivation. He was really starting to get nervous, and was well aware that plenty of people in the bloodstream sect hated him already. If they found him here, they would be murderously enraged, and the consequences were too horrible to even contemplate. Just when he was about to flee, a beam of blood-colored light appeared, shooting down toward his location like lightning. In the blink of an eye, a young woman appeared in front of Bai Xiaochun. She wore a blood-colored gown and a mask of the same color, decorated with the image of a plum blossom. Shui Mei looked into the immortals' cave with a blank expression. Never could she have imagined that someone in the bloodstream sect would dare to trifle with her. The mere idea of someone practicing cultivation right at the doorstep of her immortals' cave was completely outrageous, and she didn't know how to react. She couldn't even think of anyone in the lower reaches of the cultivation world who would have the gall to do such a thing. She could sense that the blood bottle in her immortals' cave was already empty, and in fact, the blood qi had been drained from it so completely that the bottle was on the verge of shattering. That bottle had been at work for more than 10 years, but had been completely drained in a single night. Even as she stood there, trembling and panting, the last bit of blood qi left the immortal's cave and entered Bai Xiaochun. Shui Mei's phoenix-like eyes radiated murderous coldness as she turned to look at him. Young lady Shui Mei, what a coincidence. Bai Xiaochun said, feeling a bit guilty. Seeing how furious she was, his first thought was to say that he was just passing by. However, all of the blood qi in the area was still rushing toward him because of his effort to reach the first level of the undying Heavenly King, and there was nothing he could do to stop that. On the verge of tears, he could think of nothing else to do but change the topic. This is your immortal's cave? Why don't we talk things over? I can compensate you. Before he could say anything else, numerous figures appeared, which were the Foundation Establishment Dharma protectors and elders of Middle Peak's lower finger. It only took a moment for them to sense the lowered levels of blood qi in the area, and see the strands of blood qi streaming into Bai Xiaochun. As they realized the implications of what they were seeing, they looked at Bai Xiaochun with murderous glares. It was Nightcrypt. He's the reason why the blood qi has been in decline for the past few days. You're the reason why I got hit by so many backlashes recently. So this guy did it. Damn it, it was definitely him. As their murderous gazes fell onto Bai Xiaochun, he began to shiver. Hey there brothers and sisters. We're all on the same side here, how about I provide some compensation? Beads of sweat popped out on his forehead as he prepared to offer an explanation. Before he could, Shui Mei lifted her chin, waved her sleeve, and pointed directly at Bai Xiaochun. Kill him, she said, her voice as cold as ice. She only spoke 2 words, but from those words it was possible to tell how coldly arrogant she was. It was almost like she had just ordered the death of an ant. When the surrounding Foundation Establishment cultivators heard her words, their killing intent spiked. Part of that was because of their trust in Shui Mei's ability to protect them, and part of it was because they had been driven mad because of the blood qi recently. Now that they knew who was responsible, how could they not want to kill him? In fact, even if Bai Xiaochun wasn't actually responsible, he had to be connected to the matter in some way. Almost as soon as the words left Shui Mei's mouth, the entire group attacked at the same time. In the blink of an eye, numerous divine abilities and magical techniques appeared. Countless streams of blood-colored sword qi all shot toward Bai Xiaochun. Seeing himself being attacked by a whole group of Foundation Establishment cultivators left Bai Xiaochun's scalp tingling so hard it felt like it would explode. Even with the first level of the undying Heavenly King, he could do nothing but flee in the face of such an attack. You people are all bullies, he shouted defiantly. If you think you're tough, why don't you fight me one-on-one? Bai Xiaochun was already scared witless. Clearly these people really were trying to kill him. Outrageous. It's just a bit of blood qi, isn't it? I'm a Foundation Establishment cultivator of the Bloodstream sect. I can't believe you people are trying to kill me. Are you trying to force me out of the sect? Trembling and screaming, he sped away from the countless divine abilities and magical techniques. In his mind, Shui Mei really was being too domineering. He'd even offered compensation, but all she did was wave her sleeve and stick her chin up into the air. That was his trademark. Booms filled the darkness of night as the entire lower finger of Middle Peak erupted into chaos. Numerous Foundation Establishment cultivators all flew after Bai Xiaochun, killing intent raging. However, Bai Xiaochun sped along as fast as a rabbit whose tail had been stepped on. They're trying to kill me. Help. Feeling completely maligned, he picked up speed as more and more people joined the chase. The only one who didn't was Shui Mei. Gritting her teeth, she walked into her immortal's cave to examine the blood bottle. After a moment, she suppressed her killing intent and adjusted the spell formation to make sure that the bottle wouldn't break because of the lack of blood qi. Meanwhile, the entire lower finger was in an uproar, and Bai Xiaochun's screams rose up into the air, joined by shouts of rage. How can this guy run so fast? I'm going to cut him into a million pieces. Nightcrypt, Master God Diviner, won't stop until you're dead. Despite how the Foundation Establishment cultivators gave chase, Bai Xiaochun was too fast, and Middle Peak was too big. He raced back and forth for a full 2 hours, until he finally managed to shake all of the Foundation Establishment cultivators. He's hiding somewhere, yeah, but he can't hide forever. Don't worry, Master God Diviner, might be injured, but I can still take the risk to divine his location. Gritting his teeth, Master God Diviner snorted coldly and began the process of divining Bai Xiaochun's location. After a moment passed, his eyes turned even more bloodshot than before, and he suddenly pointed off into the distance. As he did, a blood-colored butterfly flew out of the tip of his finger, which the enraged crowd began to follow. At the moment, Bai Xiaochun was hiding in a relatively remote immortal's cave, scowling and sighing. I didn't know that was Shui Mei's immortal's cave. I thought it was vacant and just didn't want it to go to waste. I didn't do it on purpose. He wanted to fight back, but considering how many people were angry at him, he knew he couldn't. It was at that point that a blood-colored butterfly suddenly appeared in front of him. Without any hesitation, he burst off at top speed. As he did, the space where he had just been standing was blasted by countless magical techniques and divine abilities. If he had been even a bit slower, he would definitely have been injured. Numerous Foundation establishment cultivators were in the area, and although some of them were of a mind to block his path, he was too quick and sped away. Once again, another big chase ensued on Middle Peak. An hour later, and the crowd had once again lost him. Master God Diviner's right hand flashed with an incantation gesture, and a blood-colored butterfly once again sought out Bai Xiaochun. Night Crypt won't escape. How could he possibly evade my divination magic? Over and over again, Bai Xiaochun came to find that no matter where he hid, the blood-colored butterfly would find him, and the enraged Foundation establishment cultivators would be close behind. Eventually, he heard Master God Diviner speaking, and realized that it was his auguries that were revealing his location. That left Bai Xiaochun grumbling in frustration, and yet, there was nothing he could do about it. Although imposter Night Crypt had studied some divination magic before, he was a novice, and had no idea how to deal with Master God Diviner. These people are all villains. The Spirit Stream sect is way better. Even with lightning and acid raid, all they did was throw some rocks. But here, the tiniest things gets them all fighting and killing. What bullies. Sighing, Bai Xiaochun thought about how much he missed the Spirit Stream sect. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.